Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good, could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you. Amazing. I have not had the opportunity ever to talk to someone who had a near-death experience.
Oh, wow. Well,
So,
I guess I'm the first one, yeah. And it seemed like you had some lovely guests on your channel already. You had my friend Mark Anthony,
yeah.
and I think Kiara from Get Griefy I saw.
Oh, yeah.
Carla Sloan I saw was on. So you had some pretty cool guests on. So I hope to follow that trajectory and just to best represent the wonderful work that you do.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for desiring to be on, because the quality of guests I've been getting has been incredible, and you fit right in line with all those. So thank you. You have so many awesome things going on. I did listen to your testimony on Alex's podcast there.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I love what he does too. That's amazing. But we had a chance to meet. We met at the conference, the Helping Parents Heal conference.
Yeah, we met right there at the bar by the pool, I believe. And I remember you're talking about that you're from Buffalo, and we were talking about the Bills and, stuff like that. So I think we're both New Yorkers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we are. I live in Niagara Falls right now, from Buffalo originally. But imagine meeting me at the bar. Imagine that. But, no, thanks.
Yeah. Well, the bar was kind of like where people, we weren't even drinking. We're just kind of hanging out and having a great time. And it's so good to see people that you see over social media just come to life. That was really nice about it.
Yeah, I've been very privileged to get acquainted with so many of them. And I've been involved. It'll be 2 years since my son crossed over on the 23rd, actually, just in a few days. So it's amazing to me what's happening so rapidly with me personally, with Helping Parents Heal and all of that. And a great organization that just embraces you and lifts you up to where you need to be, wherever you're going. And so as the podcast was given to me, I believe that it was given to me. I believe in all of the types of things that you've talked about in your testimony and things. So as I sought out the universe and what to do with my life after Jeff passed, it was very clear that this was part of it. And so I believe we're going to be sustained in those things, obviously, if we're supposed to be doing them. And I know that you followed much of the same path with what occurred
Mm.
with you. But so, as I mentioned about the near death experience, now for Heroes and Grief watchers and listeners here and everything, if you don't mind giving a synopsis of all of that, and then would part of this too is to accentuate the things you are doing and to help the grievers out there and help people in general in life. And so that's the purpose of everything I do here. So you want to share all of that with us and then let us know?
Of course, Tom, and really thank you for the work that you're doing. I think I get asked all the time, what's my purpose? And I say, well, what has been the most challenging or maybe the most painful? And I think there's a big relationship of pain and purpose because it allows us to develop more empathy, inspiration, and relatability to those, going through similar things. And you've been able to really utilize a lot of what's happened to you, as a segue within your purpose and reaching and helping out so many people. So I applaud the work that you're doing and with this podcast and your continual work with helping parents heal. Couldn't think of a better organization to be affiliated with. Certainly in your position. But yeah, I know we were mentioning that I would be, I guess, the first near-death experiencer on your channel, which is pretty cool. I've done that before, where there's another organization called the Forever Family Foundation, which is kind of similar to helping parents heal, and I was the first ever near-death experiencer to be invited to one of their retreats. So I'm kind of used to breaking ground. Um, it's what I've been doing throughout most of my life, and yeah. But I had a near-death experience that's a little bit different than maybe what you see commonly out there. And maybe this is the first time that viewers are hearing of a near-death experience. So certainly we could elaborate on it a little bit more. But I had mine as a child, which I know for some parents, this conversation will really be thought provocative, certainly, just in terms of the consciousness and the soul of a child and what that is. But I had mine at just the young age of 3 chronological years old.
Mm.
When I had my NDE, I had at the time, I didn't know this, but a condition called whooping cough, otherwise known as pertussis, and I completely suffocated. And
Ooh.
I went to a playground with family friends, and I just contracted, and I just had this whooping cough where everything was taken from me and wasn't able to breathe. And then all parts of my body just began to shut down. And I just wasn't able to do anything to control this or to influence this, but just to surrender to what was to come, and that I felt my whole body just non-functioning due to the deprivation of oxygen, to the point where I actually felt my brain literally snap in half. And once my brain cracked open and I felt that crack was when I was able to really have a full crossing over to the experience of the other side, heaven, whatever you want to call it. And this experience was so beyond words. I do the best I can to convey how beautiful, magical, mystical, euphoric it was. But words are limiting sounds and vibrations, but I do the best I can to describe things that are beyond, this reality as we know it. But my near-death experience, I was able to experience my own spirit guides. I was able to see angels all around me. I encountered a soul family. I was able to be aware of what I did, in past lifetimes and the purpose that I had as a soul. Then ultimately I was faced with a question which is like, what would I do? Would I stay on the other side or continue to live out my life? And, I just was able to see the work that I would be doing within this lifetime and possibilities. And I, much like you, purpose was something that allowed me to, continue on. And I said yes to purpose and to, uh, you know, being there for other people as much as I can to bring forward this story to remind people that there is no death. There's death of the body, but not of the soul. And we, go on far beyond the grave. And that's been my biggest mission since my NDE. But with that agreement, everything just kind of dissipated from the other side, and I was, left on a hospital bed, and the rest is kind of history. And every day I try to make sense of what happened to me and try to find meaning and purpose and different angles to really look at, my near-death experience. But it's something that I walked into, but the task, what I walk out of it is what I try to do every day of my life since that point.
Mm. So you were 3 years old only, and now many people at 3 years old, I don't remember things, I don't think really until I was about 5 in
Mhm.
my life. So I know that many who have a near death experience or heightened levels of consciousness realize that these experiences are implanted or imprinted in our minds. So you can describe it as you go. But at 3 years old, now, did you remembered being at the playground beforehand and everything at that
Mhm.
time? I know some
Yeah.
people can remember earlier in their lives, but
Yeah.
I couldn't
I
myself, but that's for sure.
Well, what I would say is, if you are meant to remember something, you will. And that was, by the spirit realm. The spirit realm wanted me to remember this. That was just a superpower that I was given. But I don't think it's anything different than the superpowers that we all have. I think people like yourself and viewers tuning into these types of channels come here because of memory. There's something familiar about what we're talking about. And when someone, crosses over, there's a part of ourselves that says, no, they're not dead. They're not gone. They're just, going from one room to the next. And we're following that memory, that voice. And I think, memory just allows us to really be connected to spirit and to be open to things beyond what we feel are reality or what we know or what's possible. So memory is a gift that we all have. And that to me is what connects us to our identity, who we are.
Hmm.
Because I think we come from the spirit realm. We're experiencing this lifetime, and the people that are most connected, they're able to really tap into memory. That allows them to really fully embody and remember who they are. But what I would say is, being a therapist, I could certainly point to trauma as a explanation for my memory. I mean,
Hmm.
I could ask almost any of my clients, when you had something traumatic, almost no matter how young you were, if it was that traumatic, there's either two ways. It's either very disassociative and you'll push it away, or you'll be experiencing that memory as if like it was just yesterday and it's full clarity.
Hmm.
And I can't think of anything in a way like more traumatizing that I went through, which was suffocation and not being able to breathe. And I was just kind of in this incubation period of like what felt like eternal suffering. But once I let go of the human breath, I surrendered to the breath of eternity, which we're all created from, and that allowed me to let go of suffering by just remembering who I was, what I was connected to, that I was more than a body, more than a human breath, and I was connected from the breath of eternity. And that allowed me to, rise through this. But what I would also say is I really understood that we're not who we think we are. I mean, when we look at maybe a child, yes, the body of the child is very young. That's two things could be true at the same time. I certainly I believe that the spirit realm is very non-binary. It's not unidimensional; it's multidimensional. So yes, on one hand, it is valid that kids are their chronological age, but beyond that is an understanding that they're an eternal soul, temporarily experiencing and expressing itself through that body, through that chronological age. It's as if you turn to a page in a book and say, all right, this is the only page of the book, this is all I understand. But if you're able to read through the whole book, it gives you a more of a robust, broader understanding of who you are.
Mm.
And the current page that we're on is the page that we're on, but we come from so much more, and we'll continue to write so many more stories just beyond this one page.
Mm. One of the things you talked about there was the time of death that you had. And for those out there that fear death or fear their loved one's death of what they experienced, it's a very brief time of your recognition of suffocation and things, and then being in
Hmm.
paradise, really, right? Is that
Hmm.
because I've heard many talk about giving comfort to those who fear death and fear the crossing over. That some have talked about how some of them even left their bodies before the actual time of death in a
Mhm.
traumatic experience. So, what would you say to people thinking about that?
I mean, I think in our reality, we live in a world of polarities. So to understand great euphoria, there has to be understanding of the polar opposite. But I would even push back on myself to say, like, yes, on one hand, that was a reality. But by going through that, I recognize that that was temporary. That did not last. And so by going through that, you just recognized in many ways how futile that was and just how that doesn't last, and the great euphoria and understanding that the only thing that lasts is love, is eternity, is euphoria, and everything else is just a temporary distraction from that. And that was the greatest exhalation that I had, was once that period let go, I recognized that this is all that was, is, and will be, and everything else is just a temporary separation or distraction. So yes, like two things could be true at the same time. On one hand, like I did experience of that, but the other hand, from going through that, I was able to just my heaven was even more heightened to remind myself, like, hey, like, no matter what you fear, how bad it can be, you'll survive that. You'll thrive through that. You'll rise above it. And our greatest fears, I'd say, like, to find our light, sometimes we have to go to the greatest darkness and see that piercing light behind it. And in my NDE, that really reminded me, like, the greatest fears that we have are not really real. They don't really hold weight. They're temporary little, minuscule moments. And at the end of the day, you're connected back to your essence. You're loved. You're embraced, and you're able to rise through that. So, near-death experiences point to a lot that what is there really to fear if you really understand,
I love that.
our ultimate reality. Um, and beliefs play a big role in our behaviors. And if we live in a world that says that, yes, fear is real, yes, in one hand, in our reality, like someone has a gun to your head, fear has a real purpose, fight, flight, or freeze kind of thing. But, in the spirit realm, it knows only love. And I learned that in some ways, love is the opposite of fear to a degree. There's nothing to worry about. All is well, will be well, was one of the messages that I got in my NDE. And that's the ultimate reality. So if you're able to have that belief and that understanding, then you know there's no ending. There's a soft, eternal, endless ending. And when you navigate the roads of life, you're able to have that degree of confidence that no matter what happens, I'll go on. I'll be okay,
Hmm.
no matter what is thrown your way. And I am living proof of that, and so are you with what you went through. And being a shining light parent, that it's just sometimes really to remember who we are. We go through these great depths of darkness to remember that our piercing and shining light was always there.
Yeah. Early on here, I want to let everybody know that we'll have links to all the things we're talking about here, and especially Jacob's testimony video is on there about more in depth about his near death experience and everything. So I tend to get into some other things sometimes, but
Hmm.
I think it's great you talked about that fear that we all have, and so you'll hear this so many times. Oh, how they may have suffered, or this type of thing, or their last thoughts, or whatever that
Hmm.
might be, and for that to be quelled. And I kind of thought it this way too, that what we're going to experience beyond this is so tremendous beyond that it's quickly dismissed, that whatever
Yeah.
fear we may have had in this human element is just quickly dismissed, and it's really not as long lasting as we in our humanness tend to put on this. Like a parent will say, oh my god, they must have been thinking, and all of this, and that doesn't resonate, is what you're saying,
Hmm.
right? That's not there.
Yeah, I mean, suffering is a human condition. It's not really a spiritual condition. And when you're really connected to spirit, there's no true suffering over there, is what I'll say. There could be suffering of a body. It's very temporary, suffering psychologically, emotionally, but all those things are human. And once you go to the other side, there's only healing and love that you really are able to lean into and experience.
What a great message of hope for everybody. That's right there, folks. That's what it's all about right there. And so when you know that, when you realize that, and I've come to a point in my life where I believe this, I know it to be true. And so you live your life differently then too. And that's the greatest part, that you don't have to
Hmm.
live your life in fear either, and
Yeah.
worry about all those things. Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode.
It's amazing, the shift that can happen, like I said, with that degree of a belief where for ourselves, if we just see ourselves as a body and the body goes, I can understand a lot of trepidation that people have when it comes to death or it comes to the passing of another that we love. We have this possessiveness and this identity of that person with that body. And when we bury that body, we feel that's it for that person. But once you're able to really have evidential angles that there is possibilities of a reality beyond the body, then all of a sudden the wheels start to spin where it's like, okay, I could have a different outlook towards my loved ones passing or to my, life and my, continuity. And there's a part of me that goes beyond just the body. And, that degree of belief really can influence one's grief and one's outlook towards, their life. But yeah, I mean, I'll give an analogy where it's just like I often ask in my presentations, like, who are you? And people just point to the body. And I said, well, you're pointing to a body, but you're also in a chair, you're in a room, you're in a state, you're in a country, you're in a continent, you're on a planet spinning the globe. So just on a physical basis, we see ourselves as very limited. Imagine what the reality is for things that we don't see and how much more unlimited we are with those things that we don't see with the physical eye. And so just on a physical basis, we are so much more than how we perceive ourselves in this boxed reality. So, that's where spirituality comes into play, where it allows us to expand reality and expand and allows us to explore things that we maybe were just blocked off from, that were always there.
Yeah, and we can get out of the muck and the mire we're in sometimes too. I think of people who are just constantly feeling embattled, I guess, everything's against them all the time or whatever, or they have a low self-esteem. And if you really start exploring these things and realizing your place in the universe instead of on this earth, you become different and you become empowered to be something. And we all have a purpose here, and there's a purpose for you out there too, in the midst of your despair, whatever that may be. Where you are, there's purpose for you.
Of course, that's really a big takeaway that I got from my NDE, that we're all connected to a such bigger reality than what we really remember or see. And, sometimes we just kind of live our lives like thinking no one's watching. We're not connected to anything. We're just kind of boxed into the ego towards itself. But there's so much love and support and guidance with us from the other side. And I think if people remember the army that was around them, how could they ever be alone or feel disempowered? We have so much around us. And that's one thing that I really was able to see in my NDE, is just you take away this prism of this box and you open it up. Like, there are spirits and love and people cheering us on. And behind us, this life is not just a random existence. There's an intelligence that goes far beyond our understanding that's guiding us in this life. And that's a very important positionality to have. And in fact, something that Albert Einstein highlighted: is life random, ambivalent, or with us? Or you could use the universe or God with that. It's a flexible term, and that's a very impactful set of belief system to govern, the GPS of our lives. And that's where spirituality could really factor into mental health. That, mental health, sometimes you just look at thing from a face value, you're not able to see the greater context of it, or the greater meaning. And spirituality could really allow people to transcend their greatest pains to their greatest purpose.
Mm-hmm. Now you're in these fields, right? What you're doing mental health work and things like that too. So how do
Yeah,
you, when you're doing that, how do you not interject the spiritual side into
yeah.
what's happening, or do you?
Well, I consider therapy to be very much of a spiritual, you know, um, act from both my perspective and the client, because I think sometimes we just kind of focus on the light, and that's great. But I think part of this work is to really to finding ways to put the light within the dark places, and to be able to go through what we're going through, to really develop unconditional love, compassion, so that we could relate it to people that cross our paths. So I think one of the greatest, spiritual acts that we can do is learning self-awareness, self-love, mindfulness, self-compassion. All those things, do well for the soul. So I think part of this is really to not bypass or ignore that part, but to really be present with it. But for myself as a therapist, it's not like I go up to clients and saying, "Hey, you're going through something, but I had a near-death experience, and let me tell you my story and what you're going through. Let's just shift your vantage point. If you hear what I'm saying, you're not going to feel a pain in your life." And I wish it was that easy, but that A, that's not appropriate. And B, like, we have to really allow ourselves to understand who we are. We're spiritual beings having human experiences, and through the human experience, we're able to really grow. And so I think, yes, two things could be true at the same time. We're a spiritual being and we're having this human stuff. We have to allow ourselves to be human and to go through, the emotional, just kind of steps, and not to bypass them, whether that's grief, whether that's processing trauma, going through depression, anxiety. We're able to really go through those things. But if we're able to have more love and compassion towards those dark spots, we're able to live out the purpose of pain and what we're going through. And that could be a segue to really relate to others around them. But, certainly in my work, um, there is a lot of more integration, spirituality, mental health. We're able to integrate a lot of, now mindfulness and breath work and stuff like that. And, sometimes and there's a lot more focus of somatic type interventions. And I think for people, you could talk about something until you're blue in the face, but if something's really within your body and you're not regulated, it's not going to help be as effective. And I think really understanding that mind body relationship is, one of the third waves of the mental health profession that we're starting to slowly come to understand. But I also train other therapists to understand NDEs, interdimensional communication, psychic phenomenon, because there's a great deal of misunderstanding or stigmatization with people who
Yeah.
might have had very real and authentic experience that were just kind of put in the blue room, or sedated or medicated. And so again, knowledge is power, information is power, and you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that's what I try to do as within my field, more on a macro and micro basis.
I love the way you
Yeah.
explain that, because I was a pastor for 15 years, and so you know I found it more effective just to be the ways that we were talking about you should be to people. Obviously, the being instead of the saying all the time,
Mhm.
and experiencing that way. And I was able to impart the same tenets of what we believe, showing it better, Christ-like in my case, that showing that to people. And we know through what the universe has taught us that loving is the ultimate of everything, and that doing or caring for others is a purpose down here. And so to be able to just do that in your work is still
Mhm.
doing that spiritual aspect, and I saw it the
Well,
same way when I worked as an ambulance person the same time I was pastoring. And so I wouldn't tell people I was working with all the time I was a pastor, and I
Mhm.
probably had more effective interactions with them on a daily basis than sometimes with people within the church. And so,
Wow.
I think and you're doing the same thing in the work that you do because of your love and caring and showing them the light that they need to see and everything. You're doing every aspect of that too. It's amazing.
Oh, from one brother to another. And and I thank you for your decades of service. That really, to me, life is about service. I learned that in my NDE, where I just kind of asked myself, all right, out of all places, why the heck did I have my experience in a playground? Like, is life random? Is there a purpose of life, or is it just like, all right, just no reason for it? I was just in a playground. That was it. And I think the playground was allegorical in a way that I was just a child playing in a playground, and I was able to see eternity. And I don't think that's anything different than what we all go through. We're all just children in the eternal playground of God, as a brothers and sisters keeper, here to, be there for each other, to serve one another, to get along, to play, to have fun, to enjoy. And I think it wasn't so much for myself, but really for other people when they hear the near-death experience, to be validation that that's life in a nutshell. We're here to serve and remember who we are, and to see beyond just the self and understand that we're all just here to, high tides rides all boats, as they say. So kind of elevate our surroundings as much as we can.
Hmm. Yeah. So you took all of that as you progressed through life. And I know that you've written a couple books.
Hmm.
Would you like to tell us about those?
Yeah, I mean, I've written two published books. It's with a publisher in California called Waterside, and my agent was actually the same agent. He just recently passed away around a year ago, but he represented Eckhart Tolle, Neil Donald Walsh, and that book's something for dummies, whatever. You know what I'm talking about? It's in every library. But his name was Bill Gladstone, and he took me on as a client and helped me to get published for my two books. He was also an author, and he had a near-death experience as well. Fascinating man, Ivy League graduate, just a brilliant mind, and has been in the publishing business for several decades with his family. I think in New York. But I never really saw myself as a writer per se. I was always told. I mean, I remember applying to a prestigious high school where my sister was, one of the best students there, and I wrote like some high school entry essay, and the principal just took one look at it and said, "This is not appropriate. This is not material." And they said, like, you're not a fit for here. And then I remember being community college where I was placed in the lowest possible level for reading and writing of non-accredited classes, and that was tough. But you know what? I had people around me who believed in me, and I had an aunt of mine who was actually one of the teachers to Jose Feliciano, who sung that song Feliz Navidad. She was a teacher for the visually impaired, but that was symbolic for the life that she lived, where she helped you to see the unseen forces. And from looking at some of my writing, she said, "Hey, you're a great writer." I'm like, "What are you smoking?" Like, oh my God, I've been told the total opposite. So again, that degree of belief that says that I am a great writer, that allowed me to just say, "Hey, I can do this. I could write books. I could help people." And so, I grew up just in my early college years, like going through some tough times and go browsing through the libraries and seeing some of the shining faces on those self-help sections and spiritual sections. And I said, man, when I want to die, and I won't never will never die, and if libraries are still around, I want to be buried next to one of these authors. That's where I want to lay. And I want someone to pick up that book and to read that story, and that's a ripple effect. And how could you ever go on? And hopefully we continue to have libraries. Everything is online these days, but I'm luckily been able to be in several libraries with my books. Hope as many as I can. But what I would say to viewers is, when someone really portrays a degree of limitation on you, it's not your limitation. It's more so what they're not able to see within themselves, and that's projected onto you. And I would say we're all eternal, we're all limitless. And if you come from a place of service and you're trying to make this world a better place, nothing can stop you. So you just got to get out of your own way and allow the universe to just kind of come through you, as I believe life doesn't come from you, it comes through you. And through surrendering, I was able to see myself as virtually unlimited to almost nothing to endless possibilities. And so it's same thing with the ND. By surrendering to the power within and letting go of that, limited illusion that I'm no good, I'm a body, I'm going to die, I'm suffering, from letting go of that illusion, of that illusion that we're not eternal, that we're not all powerful, all knowing. That would allow me to transform.
Hmm.
And so that's what those books are about. And hopefully, that story could help out someone to write their own. Because I always say that God created us because God loves stories, as Elie Wiesel says, and who survived, the most abyss of society. And I think our lives are just stories for others to be inspired by. And we all have the pen in our life. We're all able to define those stories. And so I think case situations like yourself and so many viewers, what you walked into was not your fault, but you have the ability to transform that story and to define that however you want to. And that's what being a part of the hero's journey is all about, is to seeing yourself from a victim of a story to a victor of a story.
I love it. And you don't know this, but at this point right now, for me, I'm feeling all I can describe it as is a positive uncertainty. I guess it would be. And I feel like I'm almost jumping out of my skin because there's something happening within me and something I should be pursuing. Even in the midst of the things I'm doing, I know that they're the right things to be doing, but there's something now, it seems that I'm being nudged to go further with something, and I'm not sure what it is. Exploring intuitiveness or whatever it may be. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. We're put on this journey, and I did talk to someone, and I drive Uber during the day, and I had a client today, and she's we got talking on these things, and I said, I'm not desiring of this at all, and I certainly wasn't desiring of losing my son on this earth, but I have to submit to what it is, as you were saying, and allow it to be. And those things are going to be put in place if I follow that path. And I think that's an interesting thing for everybody to pursue, to look at. I tell people all the time that if you're listening to this, it's no coincidence that you're hearing this or seeing this, and that you need to explore these things that we're talking about within yourself. We're all on our own journey. And so you need to really foster that within yourself, because there are these wonderful, amazing things out there for you too. And that's exciting. It's very exciting. And as you said, I feel like I'm not the person for this, or I don't want to be, or shouldn't be. And, but there's no choice when you really submit to it. There's no choice at all. So
Yeah.
explore it, folks.
I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves that we were hired by the most powerful CEO, in the world to do a job, and each soul has a job to do. And if we were able to really, I don't know about all people, but some people, to treat the jobs that we do to make money with the jobs that we do as a soul as seriously, with as focus and as intention, wow, it'd be amazing. With what we can do, and so much of this world is like, all right, we're going to make some money so I could survive, but spirituality is, I'm going to make an impact so I could thrive.
Yeah. The ripple effect, like you said. That's awesome. Yeah. So the two books, and what are the names of the books?
So my first book is Life After Breath, and the second book is The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. They're both published within around a 3-year span, and hopefully I have more coming. But people ask me when's the next book, and I said it's like, I never knew what this felt like, but I could imagine it. It may feel like almost like giving birth. It's like asking a parent, like, when's the next child? I love it, but it takes everything out of you in a way. I do love it, but it does take a lot of energy to write a book, and it's something that you have to feel very much called from. I really think these kind of books, again, don't come from you, but through you. But yeah, you're right. When doing the work that you're doing, it's like part of intuition is listening to those nudges, because the other side, they're constantly trying to really direct us and kind of move us. It's kind of like curling in a way. They're just kind of like doing with the sticks, and they're trying to get us to, but ultimately we have free will. We have the power to decide to choose. But again, it's like once we're connected to those in the satellites in the heaven, we have a much greater shift of the purpose that we live with. And it it's like when there's a reason for waking up each day, this world turns into such a different universe, and you're
Hmm.
living that. And it's just, it's amazing, how much your life can shift when you find that sense of purpose, and you're doing that great work, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's like I said, just doing what I feel I should be doing, and that's all. That's all you can do, right?
Yeah.
So besides that, I know you get out speaking a lot. You do other things. What else is going on now for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've started speaking probably around 25 years old, so it's almost a decade now. I'm about 34 right now. But I've been speaking for a while, and I mean, I say, as a therapist, two of the top five biggest fears are death and public speaking. And I've done one of those, and I talk about the other, and I do the other. And I said, like, it's life is really about exposures, to really grow. You have to really, in order to overcome something, you have to step by step go through it. And I said, once you like address this, you're like, all right, it's not as big of a deal as I think, and you feel very empowered through speaking. But yeah, it's something that I love to do. And obviously, when you have more of a conscious crowd, it's a little bit easier, and people who have more love in their hearts. Sometimes you go through some crowds and you just feel, just kind of like the skepticism, and nothing wrong with that, but you feel like every word is like analyzed or judged, and it could get in your head a little bit. And so I always say, is when I present, I just focus on one person in the crowd who's kind of nodding their head, and then the creativity comes and the flow comes. But if you focus on like that one person, and there's nothing to do with you, is maybe seeming like they're kind of editing and judging every word, or they're just kind of like, who is this guy kind of thing, then you start to question yourself, and your words just don't flow as easily. But I do love that, and I'm going to be presenting at places like the Omega Institute. Um, in October, I have an event at something called the Edgar Cayce Center in Virginia Beach, where
Mm.
I've been presenting for a couple of times. So a lot of cool events, been in some documentaries as well. So, I try to keep busy. It's something that I just love to do. I mean, people ask me, how do you find the time? I'm like, I make the time. It's like I'll get home at like 9 o'clock, and if there's an interview that I feel called to do, the second I get home, I'll do it, because I recognize someone out there is maybe going through a tough time, and this very word could be that log for them to hold on to. So I have no idea what people are going through, and you have no idea who's listening, who's watching, and the impacts that the words that you have. And so, yeah, in order to give, you got to receive, and I do value self-care. But again, that image of someone going through a tough time and just being an instrument through those words, like, keeps me going and keeps me relentless. And I rarely say no to almost anything these days when it comes to, making someone's life potentially, I hope to be a little bit better.
Thank you for all that you do. You're a light out there that needs to be there as well. And you're in. Is it Massapequa? Is that?
Yeah, I live in Long Island, Massapequa, where Jerry Seinfeld was raised, and the
Mm-hmm.
Baldwin brothers. I grew up here, but yeah, I've lived in Massapequa, and it's just funny. I remember being like, again, when you have a near-death experience, intuition is often like a gift that is put up on the surface. I mean, we're all intuitive, but when you go through something like an NDE, plenty of times intuition is there. And I have had a great deal of degrees of premonitions, but I just remember being in grade school, and one of my teachers was saying that they're from Massapequa, and I just felt this pull there. And then a couple of years ago, I was getting like a Reiki treatment with someone, and it was like I was driving right by a golf course, and it was like dead at night, and a voice told me that you're going to be living right by here. And this was like surrounding by mansions and things like that. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, give me a break. And then lo and behold, like a year or two ago, I just happened to stumble a place exactly around the corner of where I heard that voice. I'm living right next to the water, not on the water. I'm not Jesus, but next to it. And yeah, it's just sometimes like the like we have such a limited sense of what's possible. And if we tune into spirit, they'll able to show us what we felt was just impossible to be a possible reality. But again, it's about trust and belief that really could allow ourselves to expand our lives.
Yeah, I appreciate your genuineness, and I see this all the time. It's one of the things that amazes me about the grief circles that I've been in, and now a lot of the metaphysical world, and people are so genuine. And there are frauds out there. There's no doubt about it. But
Right.
I come out of a competitive world in almost everything that I've done, and so I found myself in the beginning always kind of looking for the ulterior motive that behind people, and finding out that those who are seeking help in grief certainly are genuine, and those who are helping seem to be on the most part too. And so it's very nice and refreshing to hear so many people like yourself talk and just say, I'm just me, and these amazing things happen to me or are happening to me. And I feel that I feel the exact same way. And it's just so refreshing to hear that honesty and genuineness. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I go to presentations and I go to I was at Helping Parents Heal, and people are looking at me. They're like, "Oh my God, you're a celebrity. You're Jacob." And I was just like, it's just so funny how people perceive me so much differently than how I see myself. I'm just literally a guy who tries to fit into my pants, who tries to pay the bills, who hopefully tries to do more good than bad in this world. And that's kind of it. But it's just funny how other people will just put, myself on a pedestal, other people. And I'm just like, I'm no better. I'm no different than you. I'm just a guy. That's really the way that I see myself. If people want to see something good in me, I just say, look, don't focus on me. Allow whatever you're seeing in myself to just remind yourself how special you are. I'm just whatever you're seeing, just to be a reflection of what you see. And so when people ask me, how do you want to be remembered? I don't think it's important for myself to be remembered, but I hope that people through maybe my work could start to remember themselves and how special they are, and to not focus on me, but to really focus on themselves and what is really truly there. Hopefully that could happen.
Now, your work that you do it locally, and do you do it online and those things too, as far as therapy work or what's available?
Yeah, no, I have a home office here, but I also see clients from here to New Zealand and stuff like that. So, it's the pressure. Not the pressure. That's the pleasure of technology. But I do a lot of psychotherapy. I do past life regression services, grief counseling, consciousness kind of consulting, and I do. You have a brain, you have a body. I try to find ways to help you, and if I can't, I certainly have a big referral network of people who might be able to help. You move the needle too.
Mm-hmm. So. And the website is
JacobLCooper.com. JacobLCooper.com is the website, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as well. So you can find me there.
Excellent. Yeah, so everybody can have it there. Of course, it'll be in the show notes too. So if you need to look it up, you can find it there. Jacob, it's been so great to get to know you better and acquainted with you, and I consider you a friend, and I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be in contact about further things, and so looking forward to that.
Yeah. Jacob and Tom walk into a bar and we have a spiritual conversation, right? So
I love it. I think there might be a show there. Who knows?
Yeah. I love it.
All right.
Well, it's it's just a pleasure. Thank you again for the work that you're doing, and it's a real gift that you are and that you're giving to people, who need us during this time. So couldn't thank you enough for having me and the work that you're doing.
Excellent, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Tom.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.